What is up, everyone, and welcome back to the Ratchet Motors YouTube channel. In this one, we're finishing up the wiring and the plumbing on our truck. But before doing so, we're just going to take a quick dive back into the bug here. Now, I want to be able to easily just pull it out in and out of the driveway, take it on regular drives, still have a lot of little electrical gremlins, other little issues. So while we get the wiring kit out, I'm going to fix just a quick ground in the Super Beetle, and then we'll get into all the wiring and the plumbing in our F100. So like I was saying, this video is mostly about the truck today, but because we got the wiring kit out, I do want to just add another ground to the main battery circuit, if you will. To be completely honest, the wiring has always been kind of not my expertise, and in all of my work rewiring the bug, I did add in a main ground, but it's actually technically to the pan rather than to the body. Now that should be okay in most instances because it should conduct through the hardware. Just to be safe, I'm going to add one more ground right to the body. Pretty much everything as far as my ECU, as far as the motor, they're all mostly grounded to the body. And I realized that I don't have like a true body ground. So that's what I'm going to add in real quick here. Again, nothing really else about the bug for today. I do want to get that new ground in, so hopefully it'll start right up and I can pull it out of the garage. One of the biggest problems I've been having is the wideband sensor. Just sometimes it reads, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it's kind of fluttering. And I think it all comes back to bad wiring. Again, I can admit I'm not great at wiring. This is probably my worst factor in working on the cars. So I'm going to start by adding in a new ground and basically take it from there.
All right, so I need to get my transmission cooler lines plumbed as well as my power steering lines plumbed. I don't have my fuel tank yet, so I'm not going to worry about plumbing that yet. And then again, I need to wire up my my new electric fans for my radiator, as well as wire up the power steering pump and add some wiring for my my alternator. So that's the plan for this video. So it'll be a little bit of wiring and wiring cleanup and a little bit of plumbing. Now the first thing I need to do is get my fittings installed on the the first thing I'm going to do is get the fittings installed on the radiator and the transmission, because I'm going to use pipe sealant on those as well. So I'm going to give them a day to sit so I can get those on, get all the line lengths figured out in the meantime, and then I'll be able to move on with all the different things. So I might do a little bit of plumbing to start and then move into the wiring, come back to plumbing once that sealant has cured. So the transmission cooler lines are usually 1/8 NPT fittings. So I got these nice little 1/8 to 6 AN. Most of my lines I'm going to run are going to be AN. So I have these 90-degree swivel fittings, as long as some straights. I think I'm going to use the swivels on the radiator and probably my straights and then into something else on the actual transmission here. But that's what I'm going to do, a little test fitting here and figure out exactly what I need. changing from the plumbing for a little bit while I wait that Teflon cure. And now I'm moving into some of the wiring. So what we see down here is our resettable fuse for the electric power steering. I just mounted that up with some Tex screws or some sheet metal screws. And these are the two relays, for our radiator fans. They're going to be activated by a ground switch that comes, I guess what you say, thermoelectrically from the fan, from the outlet of the water pump. The outlet of our coolant outlet really for the thermostat there. So the goal is to really get all the wiring complete. So I'm also gonna add in what I've heard referred to, I'm not exactly sure the term, a bus bar here, which will just make it easier for me to kind of terminate between switched, the ground coming from the, I'm having brain farts here, the ground coming from the electric signal from the water outlet, or a thermoelectric switch, if you will, along with some other things here. So I'm gonna use this bus bar just to make it a little easier on myself for those connections. All right, so this is where we got since yesterday. Now you can see this little bus bar I'm referring to here. So the lines on the left, the two black lines, are actually going to receive the ground signal from my water switch, if you will, my temperature switch. The gray lines, along with the line coming from the power steering pump, are for ignition switched. So now I can run those lines from the motor and from the engine bay, as well as from the key, and I can just connect them up on the top here. Now the things I have left as far as my relays are concerned is I have to send these two wires, these two brown ones, over to my positive of the fans to activate the fans. I also have my battery power that I'm going to terminal, or use basically my fuse block, if you will, my resettable fuse here. I'm going to use the terminal on that as basically a post to connect all of my powers. And then all I have to do is run a couple wires, again, from the motor as well as from our switching. So it should be pretty quick. I didn't film very much of this because wiring can be a little bit boring and tedious, but I will provide some updates along the way. So we have that resettable fuse down there in the bottom. I know maybe if I bring this over a little. So that resettable fuse going to my power steering pump. I need to connect the ground here. I also need to get the two grounds off of the fans, and we'll make a little maybe ground terminal, if you will, that maybe we'll go back to the battery or something else, but have them all come together at one point. So again, that's kind of where we're at for now, and then I'll get back into the plumbing. So again, you're pretty much done the wiring at this point, just a few more wires to connect to terminate, and then it's just the plumbing line. So all of that sealant, or I should say all the Teflon, should have solidified at this point. So I should be able to run my transmission cooler lines, which you can kind of see down there at the bottom of the radiator, if you look very closely. And I got to run those back to the transmission, as well as my power steering lines, which need to run down to the power steering box, or excuse me, the power steering rack down there. All right, so new day. This is where we're at with everything. Again, I didn't film most of the wiring just because it's not that enjoyable to watch, but I can kind of explain what we went through here. So I have and I still need a little cleaning up, but I have my bus bar here. So these two items are coming in is the switched signal from the temperature, if you will, the thermostat, or if you will, the water temperature. That's gonna switch to trigger two fans. I have a little jumper here, so it triggers both the two fans relays. And then these other three lines here are all ignition switched. So one is on
with the accessories running, but not while cranking. So that'll be the fans. And then the other switch ignition is all the time, and that will be the power steering pump so that it doesn't keep cycling on and off. Now there's a trigger from the power steering pump that I'm connecting to that bus. I have my main power going into my 80 amp resettable fuse. We have also for the fans, we have a what you would call a positive power for the fans, as well as our ground for the fans. So what I need and what I really have left here is I need to make a common ground that I'm going to route back to the alternator, which then goes to the basically the chassis ground. And then I need to run a common power also to the alternator. And then from the alternator, it will bridge over to the battery, which I can show you over here. So we'll basically run the power and ground across the top of the radiator here, down the frame, and then our alternator is right there. And then somewhere between the alternator and where the battery goes, I'll have a resettable fuse. Now the other thing I did was just right on the engine here, I also added in a connector. So we have yellow is the temperature switch, red is my coil, green here is for RPM. I don't have an RPM gauge yet, but I just pinned that out and then plugged it for now so that I can add RPM if I choose to. And then other than that, I just sleeved the wires and kind of ran them back and around here. So that's where we're at. Again, a lot of progress, but not the most enjoyable thing to film. Please do ask if you have any questions. This is all pretty basic relay wiring. Again, the little kit I got for our fans basically comes with the temperature switch, which we see right here. And what happens is the temperature switch gives ground to the relay as a trigger, which allows the fans to be powered. So all of this is really just relay wiring, and really same idea with the power steering pump. The only difference with the power steering pump is the relay is internal essentially. So all we're running is a few wires out of that power steering pump. Once the electrical's all done, the last thing I really need to do is run low pressure and high pressure from the power steering pump, and then our two lines from the radiator back to the transmission. So we are getting very, very close. I have a business trip this week, so I'm gonna try to get as much done as I can now and finish up filming when I get back. So I didn't show the wiring, but as far as tools, really the main thing I like here are these crimp connectors. They're basically non-insulated wire crimps, and then you insulate them yourself. But even me not being great with wiring, these have been like the most robust. Like these, I crimp them, they never fail. Even if I've wired wrong or anything like that, mechanically these always work. They never fail, they never seem to break from me. So I've had really good luck with those. And then I also use, I think they're called Deutsch or Dutch connectors. I think it's Deutsch here, with my crimping tool. But that's how I connectorize. And other people use like Weather Pack, I think, or other connectors along those lines. What I like are these Deutsch connectors. So again, you just crimp the pins, and these are pretty good for like oily, wet, any kind of environment. They're IP rated. So that's what I use to do all the wiring. And then with some of the bigger stuff, I have to use like my big terminal crimper and things like that. So again, all I gotta do now is the battery, or I should say the main power, the main ground, and then, you know, some cleanliness before I get into the final plumbing there. So just got back from a business trip, so I have been gone for about a week or so. I did just do a little bit of cleanup with the wires, ran them over the radiator where it touches the radiator. I actually added some of the thermal shielding. I think it's from DEI. I'll make sure I look it up and send it, or leave it in the description. See, it comes down and over to the alternator. I have my ground wire. Now the last thing I need to do is actually mount a fuse. It's recommended from CVF that you have a 200 amp fuse between the alternator and the battery. I'm gonna use another one of those resettable fuses, just like I have up here for my, up there for my electric power steering. I'm gonna do the same thing, a 200 amp one, and I'm gonna mount it right under the battery tray for my alternator, essentially. And then that'll be all of the electrical other than the voltmeter in the gate, in the cab. And then I just need to do the power steering lines and the transmission lines. So should have it all wrapped up today. Hopefully it is. It is football Sunday, so we'll see as much as we can get done between now and all the games. All right, so this is pretty much everything other than the battery and the main line from the battery to the resettable fuse. We see we ran the power and the ground to their respective posts on the alternator. Those now run over and across to all of the wiring that we did previously. Again, I added some of that heat protection. I'm probably gonna still do a little bit to organize the wires, but this is generally everything we need for electrical. Obviously I need a battery, so I'm gonna figure out exactly what 12-volt battery I wanna fit there. I kind of have a few options. But from here, I'm gonna get into our plumbing a little bit. So I think I'm gonna start with the power steering line just because that's the easier of the two, or of the sets. I just have one high pressure power steering line I need to make, low pressure, just a regular rubber hose, and then I'll have my two, as we can see here, our two fittings for our automatic transmission. So I'm gonna get into the AN lines for all of this. I'll kind of show everyone how I do those. And my plan is to route the AN lines partially through the frame for the transmission. We'll run it down the frame rail and pop it out there. And then it's gonna be a much shorter run here for the power steering lines. On this side, power steering line literally would just be going from our pump down to the rack there. And there's actually two fittings that are super unique and pretty critical to this process. There's the power steering pump fitting to 6AN. I think it's like an M 1.0. I'll put it in the link. And then there's also one for the steering rack itself. This one comes from Range Industries. And again, it basically takes the fittings that are on the steering rack and converts those to 6AN. So I'm gonna put these both in place and then I'll figure out how I'm gonna actually run my lines. Like I said, I'm doing the 6AN lines for the power steering. And you need to have the right 6AN lines. It's the kind, or I should say the fittings, that uses this compression ferrule, if you will. And people tell you to do these all different ways. Most important thing is that the line is cut clean and that the fitting is seated. So I'm gonna do 6AN for just the high pressure line on the power steering pump. I just use basically fuel line for the low pressure. And I'll be using, I don't really need to use this high pressure type. I probably will, just because I have them for the transmission lines as well. But pretty much, always need to start with a clean net cut, which fortunately this is one end of my reel, so I know it already has a clean cut to it. I'm just taking some of this tape off. And then what you do is you flare this out so that you can fit that little piece in. So I'm just gonna basically try to separate the line from the inner lining just a little bit. This is like a small screwdriver or a pick. And then, this is the trickiest part. You want to push this in until it's bottomed out
let me see, bottomed out inside here. This is usually where the most problem comes. I've always had the most luck using my own body weight here to try to push it on. You can see we're slowly creeping up closer and closer. Let me see if I can zoom in here. Yeah, so we want to see that white tubing all the way at the top of that silver. Yeah, so I want to make sure I always got that fitting on. A lot easier now.
We have a tool for this as well.
Forgot they do give you this nifty tool. I'm going to probably not use it as intended. Perfect. That'll get that fitting bottomed out. From here, you always want to use some kind of lubrication. Just gonna use nature's lube on this one. Just a little bit of spit. Try to get this in. Perfect. And then we just tighten it up. Oops. And then we just tighten it from there. And this is usually where I'll put it on a vise and actually cinch it down. So I think I'm gonna just do that off camera. But you want to pull this in, and you never want to over tighten it. There's usually just a little, maybe not even an 1/8 inch, maybe 1/16 gap that's usually left after tightening these up. So that's what I'm gonna do for each end. And again, just measure these to length in situation, cut them. I use my cutoff wheel. If you have a really sharp pair of snippers, you could do that. I always just use my cutoff wheel. So I'm gonna get these all to length. Again, 3 lines total, shouldn't take very long, but I'll show you what they look like when they're done. All right. So we got all the lines half complete. We got the power steering, high pressure, as well as both the transmission lines. And I just use this tape here to mark it, and also it keeps it from fraying when I cut it. I'm just cutting it with my grind, my angle grinder here. So I didn't have them all just cutting them all in one sequence just before it got too late the other night. And on the transmission lines, I'm also got them without the other end of the fittings because I'm gonna add in some more of that thermal protection, that heat shielding. I think it's DEI. Again, I'll put the link down in the description. But this goes pretty close to the exhaust. So I'm just gonna wrap them to be safe. So that's why I keep the fittings off, because I can't fit it over the fittings. It's actually a pretty tight fit. So I'm gonna kind of measure it for length, put this shielding on, and then the fitting. So this one's done. I'm not gonna shield this. I just gotta put the other fitting on. These two will get some shielding, and then I'll show how they fit actually in the truck itself.
plumbed and wired, so I'm gonna give it a shot because I really want to hear. First of all, I don't even know if the power steering pump works. I got it for like $100 off Facebook Marketplace, and if it does work, I got a custom fluid and I just want to get right in and see what happens. So I'm just gonna put it into accessories to see if the power steering pump powers on, check for any fires, any problems, and then kind of work my way through there. So it's just, I've only added fluid for the power steering pump, and I'm just gonna see if that's working because that's kind of the biggest unique thing that I've done. Otherwise, it's just radiator fan, sensors, things like that. But power steering in a 62 using the Crown Vic rack, Volvo pump, pretty out there. So we're gonna give it a shot right now. I got a battery in, and this is the first time I've even plugged it in. So I did check connections, but I haven't, nothing more than that. Resettable fuse actually reset. Exactly as expected.
All right, so that's really everything we have for this one today. Super excited to have the power steering up and running in the truck. That's like one of the biggest check marks of this project here, as far as the Crown Vic swap and doing everything over on the new chassis. As you can see below me, as I'm editing and putting this video all together, the fuel tank did arrive. I've already started filming for that episode. We have run into, as you probably expected, a few extra hiccups, a few extra road bumps with the truck here. Got all of that coming up in our next video. We will get the tank in the truck, and that's it. That's the final step of turning this into a daily driver. The fuel tank goes in. We have a charging system, we have a fuel system, cooling system. The truck is ready to go. So I could not be more excited
keep a heads up for the next video. It should be coming out very shortly. If you like what you saw, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe for more content, share with your friends, and hope to see you again soon.